Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you are joining us to the Hello Tomorrow x Syensqo roundtable on how we can use innovation for impact, specifically leveraging sustainability to really drive our business solutions and growth. My name is Rainbow Lowe. I lead the expertise at Hello Tomorrow. And if you don't know Hello Tomorrow, we're an organization that really aims to drive solutions from the lab into the market. There are several different verticals that we have for this, but the key thing is bringing change makers together all across the ecosystem. So these are people from academics, investors, corporate partners like Syensqo. And I'm very proud to say that we've been partnering with Syensqo for many, many years now. And they will be joining us for one of our flagship events, which is happening on the 13th and 14th of March this year in Paris and annually. So if you would like to continue the conversation, please join us then. As a little bit of housekeeping, the main discussions will last about 45 to 50 minutes with about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. If you have some burning questions, we would love to answer them. So please drop them into the question box, which is on the right-hand side. And you can also upvote them in terms of the popularity. Now, I won't hold you guys up for much longer. So I'd love to introduce all of our experts from today. So first off, let's go with Titta, then Olivier, then Erica. Go ahead.
Well, great. Thank you very much for that introduction, Rainbow, and welcoming us here today and Syensqo and my colleagues as well. It's really a huge pleasure to be here and learn from each other, actually. My name is Titta Rosvall-Puplett, and I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer of Syensqo. I've joined the company in January 2024, actually celebrating my first year anniversary in the company, as is Syensqo as well, right? We're what I call a startup of 13,000 employees, around 30 countries with 60 manufacturing sites, and specialty chemicals company fully focusing on sustainability. Really glad to be here today.
Hello, everyone. Glad to have you all. My name is Olivier, and I'm the Executive Director for Entrepreneurship and Acceleration at Genopole. Genopole is a French biotechnology cluster, actually historically the first French biotechnology cluster. So we're working as a cluster with research organizations, startups, corporates, in order to sort of set up ecosystems around biotechnology. We used to be solely dedicated to medical biotechnologies, and over the past 10 years, we've sort of branched out now to the whole biotechnology as a tool for other spaces, bioeconomy spaces, including food, materials, and many others.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erica Nemser. I'm the CEO of Ardent. We are broadly an industrial separations company using membranes, but we're very focused on right now commercializing point source carbon capture technologies that help the world decarbonize and help us bring the materials that we all use every day, things like cement and steel and chemicals that are responsible for about a third of the world's CO2 emissions, help them find a clear, easy, bolt-on, low-cost way to decarbonize so we can all have the materials we want and the planet we love. I've been at Ardent for about 10 years, and my focus in leading the organization has been to do obviously pioneering and groundbreaking work in technologies that can advance the way we live on the planet, but to do that by focusing on our first-in-class work and really partnering with others who are best in class in their domain so we can go farther together. And our partnership with Syensqo is an example of that.
Fantastic. Thank you for this. Now, before we go into the crux of the matter, I think it's really important to define what we mean by sustainability. There are so many metrics that we can look at the impact. Is it conservation of resources? We know that at the moment, there are a lot of critical resources that we're using now and we're consuming at an ever rapid rate. Is it also reduction of CO2 emissions? Is it things like looking at how much energy we're using? So I would love to hear from all of you of how you define sustainability, and also what does sustainability mean in of a business and industrial context. And I think if we go from you, Titta, first, like, what does sustainability mean for yourself in Syensqo?
Thank you. That's a kind of €1 million or $1 million question, in fact. But I'd start from the fact that, for us, really, in the company, sustainability is central to our business. And it's a story of innovation. It's a story of technology. And we as a company are focused on advancing humanity. We look at that from the perspective of climate, nature, people, improving lives around and the society. And so we use our innovation and science capabilities to do better and do well. And I'm happy to talk about those clear examples a little later. But we have a program that we call One Planet that really brings together all the components that matter to us, where we know we can control and that we can manage and we can do better. We have focus on climate, nature, and growth, and a better life, in fact. And this is really an area where we aim to, you could argue, mitigate risk for us from a climate change standpoint. How do we look at increasing efficiency of our production and operations? But also, how do we create value to society and our customers? And how do we mitigate impact that is perhaps negative? And how do we really reduce our footprint? So this is the sort of a central connection. I tend to think often that One Planet program for us in Syensqo allows to, really increase our handprint with our innovation and technology and the solutions we bring to our customers, enabling circularity and sustainability for them, and mitigating our own footprint at the same time. So it's really this dual goal of doing better and doing well. On carbon neutrality, actually, we aim for being carbon neutral by 2040, and we have some specific targets around these areas of focus. I can quickly speak through about those. So by 2030, we aim to reduce ambitious scope 1 and 2 by 42%, and in scope 3 by 25%. And this is quite significant considering, we aim for growth at the same time. We've just actually early this year been validated by SBTi, Science Based Targets Initiative. So it's a significant validation for us as a new company, and that gives us confidence we're moving in the right direction. And again, what's important here is looking at what science can do in this context. We also look at nature, right? I think nature is important. It's interlinked, obviously, with climate change and the environment around us. And we actually just last year launched a new target on nature, focusing on water and freshwater intake particularly. So we now aim to reduce 20% of freshwater intake by 2030, focusing on our sites that experience water availability challenges. And this is where we really look at concretely, where do we need to and where can we make a step change? So prioritizing very carefully. Our water target will be also equipped by water stewardship roadmaps that are longer term at 15 sites that actually looks at the intake volume, but also the quality of water. And this is where effluents come to play. And actually these sites are chosen because they represent 90% of our freshwater intake in a company. So we've looked at very carefully where do we have an impact and where have an ability to make a step change today. So nature matters, and we also focus our products. So we look at sustainable portfolio and circularity. We actually have a target on circular sales. So we aim to have 18% of our sales by 2030 of circular products that really enable circularity for our customers. So this is, again, a story of innovation, right? And I talk a little bit about that later on concrete examples. And finally, but I would say actually more importantly, is our focus on people. So we really here aim for our employees and society's well-being around. Our focus on targeting to have 0 accidents is fundamentally important for us. We also focus on gender balance and offering living wage for our employees by 2026. So again, One Planet for us is a surround, very holistic strategy that enables us to really look at what matters for us and where we can make a difference.
Fantastic. Olivier and Erica, would you like to add anything to what Titta's just said?
I think that was a very complete answer. And there's not much. I would just say from a small company's perspective, right? We're a smaller company innovating and we're growing, hoping to one day be the size of the Syensqo. So as we look at sustainability, it's the impact that we can have on other organizations. How do we enable them to reach their goals? Because that's the big point of leverage and impact.
Just, I mean, yes, of course, Titta has said everything, but this sort of resonates with our journey through sustainability concerns. We used to be not at all about that, right? We were really focused on health, right? That was we were on the medical side of biotechnology. Turns out that biotechnology is not a bad tool in order to work long-term on sustainability when it comes to the businesses. So two things happened, basically. The market for sustainability came to us. First, because startups were coming to us saying, okay, we like what you're doing, but we would like to use that for developing startups that are really about building sustainability in different spaces through biotechnology. And the second thing is exactly resonates with what Titta was just saying before, which was corporates came to us and said, okay, we're sort of emphasizing right now our sustainability long-term goals. And then in order to do that, we need to partner with biotechnological focused organizations. So would you like to work with us in order to sort of source the kind of partnerships we could have with different kind of actors, public research labs and startups in order to sort of enmesh that into our long-term goal of developing sustainability strategies.
Fantastic. And to build on what you said, I would love to hear more about, concretely, we know that advanced technologies like carbon capture, circular solutions, they show a lot of promise. They've been showing promise for a couple of decades now. But in terms of implementation, it comes with costs and operational shifts. What are the key business cases? So these are really concrete examples that we can showcase the audience that prove these investments pay off. So I would love to hear from all three of you, but I think in terms of, highlighting this particular success story, I think Ardent, I think Erica, you would be the best place to showcase this. So I'd love to hear from you.
Sure. I would say I'm going to echo a theme that Olivier brought up, which is this is not necessarily where we started, right? We started as a separations company, a membrane separations company, and we still are. And the focus of those were a broad swath of important industrial separations, because if you think about all the things that we use, we produce them, but they're not always at the purity that we need to consume them. The obvious one is water, right? There's a lot of salt water, but you need to get the salt out, right? And that's true across a broad set of spaces. So sustainability was always a part of the business model, as Olivier said. So we would work with customers who wanted to purify materials so they could recycle them and use them again, or to make the chemical synthesis of a reaction for a pharmaceutical drug be more efficient and go faster. And those are valuable, obviously, from an economic standpoint. And then we really leaned into the innovation around using our technology platform to be able to address something like carbon capture, which is a nascent but really developing market. And that has been, I think, it's still a journey, right? Everyone's looking at, 2025 is where we are now, but 2030 goals, 2035, 2040 goals. And we're seeing that there's real commitment to those and a real change, even in the last couple years, around organizations willing to invest their time, their money, and their resources to capture the carbon that they have on site, explore the technologies that they have to do that, and create a realistic pathway. Even 3 or 5 years ago, people told me that it was going to be 20 years away before companies would talk about it. And that's not true. It was much faster. And even 3 and 4 years ago, it started changing from organizations that were doing a lot of paper exercises. So they had lots of Excel spreadsheets around what projects could look like, and but really shifted to what are the practicalities. And we saw a lot of that traction. And we saw it with our own partnerships with other organizations to make it real. We don't do this on our own. We have partnerships across industry and a lot of investors who've invested in us to be able to make this into a reality. So I see that that's a real goal, and it's all built on ultimately being economically attractive for us and economically attractive for the customers that we're working with, and often in some very simple ways. For example, we have partners and customers that we work with that they buy carbon dioxide, they buy CO2 on the market because they need it in their process for some reason, right? I think the one that everyone can probably relate to are things like beer, right? It's a fizzy beverage, right? There's CO2 in there. And they produce CO2 in their own site, but they release it to the atmosphere. So now it's starting to become discussions in various organizations across the globe of how do we connect those two so we reduce our total emissions by using some of our own materials, essentially. And those are happening everywhere. So I see this as inherently connected and bringing in different parts of the organization, not just sustainability, but procurement and other parts that are really driving towards business performance. And that's important.
I'd like to go a little bit further, Erica, in terms of really, I love what you were saying, where you had started with Ardent is not where Ardent is now. And I've had a couple of examples to showcase that, but if you really had to dig a little bit further, what were the key success factors? And really, what were the key metrics where you said this is going to be a roadblock or is currently a roadblock, but this is what we're going to be doing, the next 5-10 years as a solution?
Sure. I mean, it's taking a risk. We're betting big on this, right? So there is an element of, there was a moment where we had to do the go big or go home discussion amongst ourselves, right? So that was definitely one, which is, do we want to be a smaller company that has more modest goals, that can sell products in a range of applications, that have a sustainability element to them, but they're not foundationally about sustainability? Or do we want to focus on some of these much bigger applications that we're uniquely well suited to be able to drive that innovation, that creativity, and that impact into the marketplace? But it's going to be a big challenge. And are we ready to take on that challenge? And do we change our organization to be able to do that? And that's multifaceted decisions and challenges. One is, we had to reduce the number of things we're working on. No organization, certainly not a small one, can be successful at trying to innovate and drive new products in 10 different technology platforms in 10 different directions. So we had to bring a lot of focus. And so that was one change. And really that meant that everyone on the team was now focused in one domain instead of across a number of projects. But then we also had to approach the market in a different way. And that was a lot about, as I spoke about, partnerships. And we had to realize that it's a combination of extreme patience and extreme impatience. So the patience is we're on a 20-year journey to get through an energy transition and get through a sustainability decarbonization journey across the globe, across industries. And that's not going to happen overnight. And we all see the numbers of how much we have to change every year and that we have to start making change. So despite seeing that it's a 25-year journey to get where we want to go, it's very, very important that we take action today and that our team moves very quickly. So it's also combining those two things, which is a little bit different than how we and many others have been operating. How do you combine that patience that not everything is going to happen this year with the urgency that we can get done more in this year than most organizations can get done in 3 or 5 years and push at that?
Completely hear what you're saying. So it's really focusing on the solutions that you know that you are good at, the partnerships, approaching the market in a different way, and the team. And I can see Olivier nodding along in so much agreement. So I am assuming that you also have examples and comments as well on this.
I do, but when I'm listening to Erica, I'm just thinking I'm going to introduce her to every startup we're working with, because that's right on spot. One of the key things you alluded to, Erica, was, and I think that's really important for us, because we are working with very early stage companies, so not 13,000 people startups, we wish, but we're working with really early stage companies, and they're all very mission driven, and I absolutely respect that. So technology based, mission driven, that's absolutely the right mix. But there is an element that we've been working really hard on making every client company we're working with aware of, which is it's all about growth now, especially in that particular climate. I mean, we've probably been surfing on the sustainability wave for the past, I don't know, 15 years or 10 years, but now it's getting a bit more complicated, right, in the current climate. So it's really about growth. So two examples I want to give. So you can be mission driven, but you need to find a genuinely efficient business model. One example I have is we're working a lot with biotechnology-based food startups, right? Gourmet being one of them. Gourmet is a wonderful French company still at an early stage. They're doing cultivated foie gras, which is foie gras without all the drawbacks you can imagine. So they've been from the beginning very technologically savvy, very conscious of the reasons why they were doing that. I'm not gonna push the envelope to why we need to revolutionize our food systems. But from the very beginning, we've worked with them in order to make sure that they were sort of putting the focus on what was needed in order for them to be successful as a company. And when it comes to food systems change through biotechnology, there's one key indicator, which is price parity, right? You can have the most fantastic goals you can set up in order to change the system, but if it costs too much, nobody will buy it, right? So that's one thing. So they've been working around this strategy. I'm not going to tell too much around it because they're at a very early stage, but they've been working really in order to how do we reach customers, what are the pathways to do that, and how do we sort of technologically mesh our what we do with ways of putting the price down, right? And that's why this second generation or third generation of biotechnology food companies, they're all doing that now, because it's been a nightmare for the pioneers. It's always a nightmare for the pioneers, but because if you can't reach that, then nobody will buy your product. The other one is a company that's sort of in the neighborhood of what Erica does at Ardent. I'm not saying, but which is a company called Abolis Biotechnology, and Abolis is basically doing synthetic biology in order to produce specific microorganisms themselves able to produce whatever asset you want to do for different spaces, from pharmaceuticals to food to whatever. And their technology is really one of the greatest I've come across over the past 5 years. Their platform, right? So one of the difficulties we've got when we work with early stage companies is really don't be too fascinated by the abilities of your technology, because technology is great, but you're running a business, right? And so we've worked with them, and I mean, they're really good entrepreneurs, but we've worked with them, and they've been really careful to set up a business strategy, which was basically, and we're going to talk about that later, I guess, which is basically they've focused on non-raising investment, but on partnering at a very early stage with large companies in order to be able to scale their technology in different spaces, right? And that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's not about the product you've got. It's not about the technology your platform carries. It's about really what's your business strategy in order to make sure that you're, as Erica mentioned, that you're able to grow fairly quickly and to grow in a way that's very sort of self-sufficient in order to maintain that constant growth over the years. It's a long-term goal. It's a long-term strategy. And not every time, of course, but most of the times it works if you're putting a lot of emphasis into that part of the business.
100% agree with Olivier. The first million euros are the hardest, yeah. Right? And then the first 10 million are the hardest, because that is, where is the customer problem and can you serve that first customer? You know, exactly. Everyone can, you can see the pathway to when I have a massive amount of production and where the market is going, but who's the first customer where, and what is the value proposition I'm going to offer them to convert that into a sale? You solve that one, and then it's like a lily pad, right? You've got to land on one, and then you can jump to the next one. 100%.
And last thing, I completely agree with you on the go big or go home. This is, I mean, there's no other way now. And it takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of risks. It takes a lot of cultural change, I guess, also. I've got examples that didn't go very well because there was reluctance to that sort of stepping into the large, ambitious, go big part of that. But yes, this is the only way, really.
And the thing we tell our team, and that's maybe help with building a team or thinking about this, echoing Olivier's point, is you need to fall in love with the customer's problem. You can't fall in love with your technology. That is your goal, is to every single person has to fall in love with the customer's problem, even if you're not customer facing, or perhaps especially if you're not customer facing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this is a very, very important note to drive home for everyone, because say, for example, even on our side at Hello Tomorrow, we have an early stage startup competition called the Global Challenge. We have about 4,000 applicants each year, and I sort of see the okay, the good, and the fantastic applications. And the really differentiating factor between the good and the amazing is they have a fantastic disruptive technology, but they know what they want to do with it, and they have a very, very strong business model. And they've looked into the market, they've done their market validation, they've done all of the things that really are foundational to a good business. I would like to touch a little bit about what you were saying, both Olivier and Erica, about the customer need versus market demand. How do you envisage this will be shaped in the future, based at looking at a sustainability lens? We know a lot of people are really focusing on sustainable solutions, but how do you think that this is going to be shaped in the future? And Titta, feel free to join in as well if you also would like to.
Erica, please go on.
I would say every customer, every individual customer and customer segment are unique, and them broadly, and broadly could be Europe, or broadly could be cement, or right. But ultimately, it's down to an individual business and their facilities. Just as Titta was talking about, you're looking at all of the customers who are making changes are combining a number of factors, right? Where their facilities are, what their goals as a business are, both their profit-driven goals, right, and their sustainability goals, and where do those meet, and what are the interesting levers that they can pull to achieve both of those, right? We could reduce our costs and increase our productivity and be more sustainable if we made these kinds of changes. And so what we're always looking for is to understand what's the decision-making prioritization and dynamic in these individual customer organizations, and who's going to be a first mover, who is willing to try something new and implement something new as a first step in changing their entire footprint, right? Because it might be starting in one facility before they expand to all of their facilities. And so, and that's really talking to customers and understanding the uniqueness. When we put one of our pilot facilities out for carbon capture in a kiln process, I remember going to the siting, meaning where we were going to site the physical unit at this plant. And you can see that it's surrounded by houses in this beautiful setting. And so we knew that our value proposition was high for them because, you know, we're a low emissions solution that's capturing. But for them, it was not just that, it was, can you make it small and fit in this space, the full commercial system? Like, that's our constraint. That's the reality for us. You have basically this truck-sized parking spot to be able to fit a full commercial system. And if you can fit in here, great, that's a workable solution. And if you can't, you can't, because this is the size of the plant and this is what it is. And so those realities are often the things that are driving decision making, and really understanding customers at that level is important. And that's not any different than any other business that's trying to sell something where you say understand your customer. It just looks a little bit different in the sustainability, decarbonization, et cetera world, because they're combining so many different drivers and so many different groups in order to come to that decision. And it's rare that we're pulling just as I said, just a sustainability lever. We're also typically pulling a economic efficiency, cost reduction, right? Multiple different levers across the business.
Yeah, I like what you say, Erica, there. And I think customer, you know, the ultimate end user, so to speak, really matters. And, you know, you could argue behaviors are changing, right? I mean, you know, if we look at the population we're going to leave the planet with, you know, that's what we have to have in our minds somehow. That's what should be our driver, you know, and how do we tie that into innovation and technology? I mean, Syensqo, we're B2B, we're further removed from direct to consumer, a little bit like Ardent is. So this is where I think one really needs to have a full value chain approach, right? I mean, Olivier, when you talk about price parity, you know, somewhere there, somebody is going to look at the cost of things. And when we look at the cost of raw materials that are cleaner, safer, more, you know, low carbon, circular, or so forth, it is not to say they're immediately lower price. So somewhere there, the pricing structures need to travel. And I think unless there is a real value chain approach to this, we're not able to make the shift change we want to do. The technology is there, the ideas are there, but then it comes down to cost of goods, right? And then it comes down to cost of or the end customers and end consumers' willingness to pay. And this is what actually somehow requires, it's not just actually industry and innovation and businesses. It needs to be almost the understanding from governments who look at and come and, in a certain way, incentivize innovation, regulate in right places, though, not to stifle innovation. And I think it is a whole holistic view that should be set out there to support this trajectory. Just one example where we're trying to, in Syensqo, to manage our Scope 3 upstream footprint, right, which represents 60% of our total footprint, and 80% of our carbon footprint come from our raw materials. And we've set just this year a climate pledge, basically, for our top 70 suppliers, really trying to send a signal to our upstream suppliers to say, we're going to work with you, work with us, let's aim for similar net zero goals. And this way, we're trying to pull along our upstream supply chain while we work on solutions to help, therefore, our customers to actually receive lower carbon and circular solutions. So it really is a whole holistic value chain approach in a way. And I think if everybody was looking at, let's aim for higher performance, lower impact, at every step of the way, wouldn't this be possible somehow? I don't know. Olivier, what do you think? You're on mute, Olivier.
Sorry, I was getting overexcited in my answer and I was on mute. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that brings us to to get back to your question, Rainbow, which it brings us to, from the startup point of view, right? It brings us to very different answers, depending on if you're a B2B or B2B2C company, or if you're a directly consumer-facing company, right? So what happened? I mean, one thing that really striking over the past 15 years is that whole combination of sustainability goals and growth, traditional preoccupation it has been carried out by the corporate world, right? I mean, okay, Titta, I know you're a startup, but you're also you're a very large startup, so forgive me for considering that you're a corporation. But a lot of corporations have sort of inserted very strongly into their wholesome strategy the sustainability dimension, right? So if you're a startup, then partnering with corporations is one very good way to do that, because you're sort of penetrating a larger than you value chain, right? So you're at one point of the value chain. So you're part of the solution, but you're also part of a larger ensemble, right? If you're a directly consumer-facing organization, then that's probably a bit different and a bit harder, because consumer behavior depends on many things that are sort of overarching sustainability concerns, right? So price was one of these things, but I think then we need to put, as you mentioned, as you rightfully mentioned, Titta, we need to put other players on the table, right? And I'm a great fan of working with regulators, actually. Regulators don't necessarily stifle innovation, right? They can sort of provide a good combination of sustainability concerns, growth opportunities, but we need to work with them, is basically what I'm saying. We need to work with them in order to bring on the table the incentives for every player involved, right? We need to have more probably consistent throughout space and time regulations, right? And not an ever-changing one. And I know that's difficult, but I mean, if you're in that particular side of the spectrum, then we need to take into consideration different actors, and not only what we imagine the consumer will be. We can probably change a little bit, reorientate the consumer behavior, but we can't do that alone as a startup or as a small organization.
And what would be sort of one of the main call to action, as it were, considering on our audience today, we have people who are from either the policy world, who are academics, investors, startups, other industrials. Like, what would be the main call to action for them today?
Who would you like to go first, Rainbow?
Olivier, you go ahead.
Oh, yeah. That's not a 1 million question. That's a 10 years question. But like I said, first, everybody needs to be aware at a very early stage that you need to have, you're entering the field where you need to have all the players around. So basically, I think it's fairly easy. I mean, it's demanding, but it's fairly easy to. And we're doing that a lot to work with larger players, corporate players, right? We know how to do that. They're absolutely eager to do that. They're demanding, of course they are, but I mean, I've been doing that for 20 years, right? The process is in order to sort of partner with them as is sort of more fluent compared to what it was 20 years ago. But we need to bring the policymakers on the table as well. I mean, that's what we've been doing a lot in biotechnology traditionally, because we're coming from pharma, where it's sort of an activity for everybody. But we've been doing that a lot over the past years with food systems, with materials, with all the whole bioeconomy part of that, right? And that's part of the game, is what I'm trying to say. So you need to join as a startup. You need to join sort of alliances or unions or whatever you want to call them in Europe or in the US or global ones, and make sure that you're part of the discussion. That's exactly what I'm doing. And some of the clients companies we've got, I mentioned Gourmet before. Gourmet is really good at that, right? They've got a whole team. They're a small startup, but they've got a team dedicated to that, because what they're selling is sort of having meeting obstacles in the whole policy side of things. So they've been working a lot with that, and it pays off. And again, that's something we can learn from pharma. I'm sorry to say that, I'm not, but that's something we can learn from that. That's one thing. And the other thing is, because we're talking about sustainability, right? And because we're 2025, we need to seriously, and that means, by we, I mean all the type of players around the table and other, we need to seriously make sure that investment is not drying out. That's my main fear, right? And so that's not a policy only issue, but that's also a policy issue. We need to keep investors with us, right? We need to have these vehicles still running, and I know it's difficult times and things like that, but I just don't want the sustainability-oriented startups to lose that, right? And we're in danger of that. I mean, I don't know, Erica, what stage you are, but I mean, especially at a growth stage, we really need to have them on board, to keep them on board as we had for the past 10 years. Sorry, I've been a bit long, but I'm a bit concerned about this part of things. Yeah.
Yeah, I could maybe jump. I don't know, Erica, do you want to jump in?
I mean, I concur. It's there's always been this notion, particularly in science-based startups, whether it was in the pharma and biotech side or the hard tech side, where you need to physically produce something. It's on a digital solution, and it needs to reach scale, and you're bound by what your science will do, right? Your small molecule chemistry or whatever. You can't just pivot it and turn it from one thing into another. And that has been the valley of death, right? And that's the types of investment it takes to move from one stage of innovation to the next, right? To proving it in the lab, to then proving it at a larger scale. For us, it's in the field. In the biotech arena, it's going to move into clinical trials, et cetera. Those are expensive prospects. They take time and they take commitment. And it's not enough to be in the stands cheering. We and every other organization needs players on the field who are doing things. Some of those things are with money, some of those things are with action. And it's true to get through all those valleys of death, because it's a journey for most of these technologies of, at a minimum, 5 years, more often 10 and 15 years to sort of really reach their kind of full potential. And so it takes that kind of commitment for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you, Erica, and both Olivier. I think, particularly in the small, medium enterprise space and startup space, there are often consortiums around that support actually the sort of active voicing, some call it advocacy toward lawmaking and regulatory planning. And I would definitely support that. I think so often regulators actually need that scientific and technological understanding, what is possible. And actually, if you think about what does good regulation look like, I think good regulation for me looks like something that enables innovation, incentivizes innovation, sets the guardrails, also how to operate, but also, acts a bit of like a stick at certain places where, okay, so let's move and, shift from places where markets can do better, particularly when you look at environmental regulations, supporting the environment and, for instance, EU Green Deal. There is this carrot and stick notion in a way. And, in some geographies, in some jurisdictions, there is more that carrot. US used to have that with IRA, and in Europe, perhaps we're hopefully moving in that space. But it's always a balance. It's always a balance how you support businesses and innovation to move forward. And I think from a business side of things, small or large, what is really, really important is certainty, is some level of certainty how the regulations will be in near and longer term, because this allows us to make business decisions. This allows us to plan for portfolios and the investment decisions we make. So lack of that is actually worse than having clarity of it. So, you know, that's really, really important. And again, it's where I think today, particularly in a geopolitical context, I believe the world is changing, and somehow we must too. And we need to just be ready for this, to basically partner with governments and regulators to support the right direction of regulations and legislation that guides us and allows us to build what I would say, making sustainability competitive in a way. Like, this is part of a business value proposition. It is not add-on, and it is not considered as hindrance either. So it should really become that competitive value add. I think if we look at alone energy efficiency or transportation, for instance, you know, how do we enable solutions to be brought into e-mobility, for instance, you know, from a battery standpoint and so forth. We as Syensqo provide solutions for transportation that actually makes e-mobility possible, and batteries last longer and more durable. And we need regulations. Transportation sector needs regulations like that to support, and the lack of it won't be helpful. So I think there is this innovation side of things for sustainability. I think the other thing that we observe, particularly in Europe right now, with tens and thousands of pages of regulations, there is an intent to simplify, and I think this is really important to sort of look at coherence. What, for instance, reporting regulations have been put in place. You know, this is become a whole science in and of itself, for all the purpose to avoid greenwashing, increase transparency, greenwashing and equity washing, actually, I would say, and increase transparency, all the things that I would support and we would support. The challenge is that when reporting regulations simply becomes a burden and no longer enable a level playing field for companies to demonstrate transparently how they're acting on sustainability. And this is a challenge for small companies in the future as well. So it's very important, I think, that when we look at sustainability linked regulations, is that they're considered in a way that what is applicable and meaningful for those who need to understand. I think, Olivier, you made a point on what about the investors, right? And, you know, today even there's a whole alphabet soup of regulations for sustainability reporting, let's say CSRD or CSDDD and taxonomy and so forth. It would be interesting to see how investors are seeing this information coming. And we will know more I believe, in a couple of years' time. But again, having this whole value chain holistic approach when legislation and regulations being defined should be there really to enable the sustainable solutions from an innovation standpoint to thrive. I think that's the only way we can move forward with the challenges we have at hand.
Absolutely, 100% agree with all that you've said, Titta. I am quite conscious of the time, and I know that we've gone into the main discussion part. We have a couple of very, very interesting questions in the question box, and I want to actually build on what you've just said, Titta, about the regulations. Alex Ashworth says, thinking about the regulatory side, since global regulations are constantly changing, how can businesses adapt rather than react? Can we have regulatory foresight to better attract investments and partnerships? I don't know who wants to take that one. Olivier?
Put your foot on the door. I mean, I was saying that before. That's really what it is about, right? Regulations is not something that comes out of thin air, right? It's driven by influence, it's driven by positions taken by different players, right? So if you want your position to be taken into account, well, have a position, right? Have a public position and work on it, have people working on it. That's one thing. The other thing is, Alex, you're right about the constant change, right? And it's what I'm saying is still true, but it's about really mitigating the change, because you can't control the fact that at some point everything changes because, well, sign of the times or whatever you do. So it's just a way about mitigating that risk. But really, it's a full-time job also for the companies, being large corporations or early stage startups. Really put some effort into that.
For sure. Definitely, I concur. I would say the other piece of it, or the thing that I'm now reminding myself, is for all these changes that we saw in history of, it was this way and then it was that way, right? And we see them as a before and after, whatever the signature policy or event was. In the midst of that, it looked like it does now, right? It looks choppy. It looks like we're making headway and then we're moving backwards. And it looks dynamic and we don't know which way it's going to sort out. But we can all look at these and say, yeah, the trend is going, in this direction, right? We're talking about that trend here, even if in the moment by moment, right, it seems like it's got a little bit more back and forth to it. And then it's, as Olivier said, one, to be able to sit there and say, right, the arc of the universe is tilting in that direction. I'm going to become part of that. It's not going to be linear, right? In a forward motion, and just accept that, but realize that you have a role to play. And as a business, back to these points of saying, what's the strategy that we're going to utilize that makes sense in that long-term view and is adaptive in that short-term way? And it is market making in the way that Titta talked about. I mean, in North America, we all went through regulations as far back as the 1970s on clean air and clean water, right? And at that time in the US, rivers were lighting on fire because the pollution levels were so high and people couldn't believe it. And it took a while in that mix to get to reflect the common will into the legislation and then to make that change. For companies that were working on the solutions to that, it was market making because it created clarity in the way that Titta was describing. And today we accept that as a cost of the world that we live in. If you have a traditional internal combustion engine, you have a catalytic converter on that so that you don't pollute the air, and you just accept that that's a small piece of the cost of that automobile. And we've moved to that world, and we're seeing ourselves now in the process of taking on a similar type of challenge in a very big way, and the messiness of what's involved in that, but that doesn't mean not to be involved.
Yeah, I like what you say, Erica. Not to be involved is very important. I mean, as in being involved is important. Something makes me think, climate change doesn't feel politics, and that's quite an important thing when you think about it. Is that work within the boundaries that there is on today's legislation, but don't be afraid to participate and help regulators to understand what works and doesn't work. There are often consultations, public consultations by default, right? And partner with others really to do what needs to be done. And if you look at Europe alone, Europe aims for carbon neutrality by 2050 and China by 2060, and China is probably going very fast at this. And these are all opportunities, right? So if you just look at where the trend is going in the longer run, you're able to really actually build opportunities from this and take things forward. So I would just say, yeah, be ready to partner with others and stay true to your values, and be ready to race in a way that where technology and innovation allows you to go.
Fantastic. So building off of that, we also have another question from Saurabh. Hello, Saurabh. We took some real life examples here for like Abelis and Gourmet. I would like to get your views on another real life example. What do you think went wrong with Kinko? And Olivier, I think you said that you'd be happy to answer this one.
Oh, that's Saurabh. I didn't say it for Saurabh. Nothing went wrong. Well, I mean, okay, markets are stupid, really. So that's the problem. No, but I mean, they're one of the most clever entrepreneurs I've seen in my life, right? Jason Kelly. They've got a platform that is absolutely technologically amazing, that solves a lot of problems. And by the way, they're not dead. They're just pivoted to something a little different, right? Which will bring a lot of, a lot of success, I'm sure. So I'm not investing in any company for obvious ethical reasons, but I would invest in them. That would be the first ones. So the only thing is they IPO'd early, and markets are impatient and don't know anything about things, and it went awry because of that, because of the lack of patience, because of the context that was a bit strained, because of everything. But as a company, they are absolutely amazing. Okay, getting back to what Erica was saying before, go big or go home. They went very, very, very big, and it's worth it. And at the end of the day, there will be outcomes of that. There might be the pioneers in that, but they've put synthetic biology on the table. They've got a very versatile platform. They've sort of pivoted through very intensive machine learning stuff, and they're a great company. I mean, it's only they're like 10 years. Let's have the discussion in 20 years. Right? And I'm a huge defender of them. Really, sorry, I'm getting heated every time.
Okay, I see time is going by incredibly fast. So firstly, I would like to thank all of the speakers and all of the audience today for an honestly incredible discussion. I hope that, it's helped at least some of our audience today. And to give you a bit of a summary of the things that we've discussed, organizations are really need to have a balance between the short and the long term. I think one of the key things that we have heard from all three of you is that change takes time. And we've got to be patient and we've got to be committed. But it's really that long-term goal that we're all hoping to look towards. The second thing in terms of actually looking into things that we can control within the business. Where are you focusing your business goals? What kind of partnerships are you nurturing? And really importantly, to focus on approaching the market in a slightly different way, focusing on your customer needs, because ultimately, sustainability without a true business model and without looking at the economic viability is a dream. It can't succeed without actually having key metrics towards your success, looking at what your customer needs are. And I think this is a really, really important message to drive home to a lot of our startups that within the ecosystem, but also people who are academics and hoping to make a change. And then sort of the last two things, and this is how I compartmentalize them, is regulations are constantly changing. So sort of the metrics for success are really looking at the economics, the price priority, looking at the whole value chain, and then trying to incrementally change within each single sector. The other thing that I know that Olivier and Titta and Erica also discuss was that as a community, we have a lot of influence. So whether it's the investors, whether it's the academics, the early stage startups, other industrials, we have a duty to inform regulators, to, put in the implementations that we would like to see. And that falls on all of us, myself included. As we're wrapping up, I'd like to thank you all, number one, for attending and all for your time. Honestly, I think it's been very, very insightful. In our last 2 minutes, is there anything else that you would like to say to the audience, Titta, Olivier, and Erica?
Well, I mean, as long as we're working with the Syensqos and the Ardents of this world, yeah, I'm pretty optimistic. Really, it's all gonna go well. But yeah, it's a long-term thing, right? So let's keep on working on that.
Yeah, I would add to that, and we tend to say these days, stay course and be courageous, and remain on your values, because this is really important today. And the climate doesn't feel the burdens that we perhaps feel today as a company. So really make sustainability competitive, and that will shift change, and be close to your customers.
Yes, thank you very much for the platform and for convening us all today. It's really been a wonderful conversation. And yes, I'm optimistic as well. And with all these things, first it goes slowly, then it goes quickly. So we just have to keep on.
Fantastic.
Excellent. Thank
Well,
you.
I hope you all have a fantastic day, and we will continue to change the world together. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.